Live Hackers, today is a very special episode of Happiness Patterns with Peruquois, who is the top performer of world music in Australia and #1 workshop facilitator for women in the world. Just yesterday she gathered, can you imagine, 1,000 women for a workshop in Moscow to reconnect with themselves, to feel and find their essence, to cleanse. It's amazing. I can tell you, I've been organizing for her once, and I was just standing behind the wall of the workshop, and it was really special. Even 200 women together make the walls shake. I can't imagine what happened with 1,000 women. She shares a lot of golden nuggets both for men and women in this episode, so please welcome Peruquois Francis just after our intro. Patterns of happiness are frameworks that always work. They are tools and practices that will bring permanent change to your life for better. We're not looking for temporary solutions. We change and transform. We practice what we preach, and we're gonna share it with you here. Be careful, because you can become seriously happier today. Peruquois, I know you as a singer, and I've been also organizing a workshop for you, and this workshop was for women.
Yes.
So I don't really know what it was about and what was happening behind the walls. So can you tell me a little bit about this other aspect of you? Who are you behind the walls with women, and maybe how you came to this?
That's secret women's business, Dima. How can I reveal that? Okay, he's asking me to take down the walls. All right. So I work with women. When I call a group of women together, it's anywhere from 150 to 300 women these days. So I don't do small workshops anymore. I love the power of a big group of women. And by power, what I mean is that there's something incredible about when you bring a group of women together who are really committed or inquiring or thirsty to know more about their true nature, to know who they are as women, how their body works, instead of being ruled by their emotional world, and how to open up to who they are really and accept themselves, because as you know, in the world today, women doubt themselves terribly. They're highly critical, they're highly judgmental, they feel like they're never enough, they're competitive, jealous, and quite anxious. Actually, women are getting more and more anxious because of the pressure of the world. So what I create is a very sacred and safe space, and I really call it the womb space, because if we think about going inside the womb, there's a sense of mother there, and I think I carry this quality. I carry a couple of different qualities, but certainly I carry this quality of mother. Not the mother that drove you crazy necessarily in your house, but a woman who has realized something very deep about who the feminine truly is, who this principle is. And when I speak about that, I'm not just speaking about Mother Earth, which I am speaking inclusively of Mother Earth, but I'm also speaking about this formless feminine principle, which really just vibrates and flows like waves through every particle in creation. And she's dynamic, she's chaotic, she's flow and undulation, she is crazy, she's beautiful, she's powerful, she's just all and everythingness. She's creative, she's destructive, but she flows through everybody, and it's something we almost forgot, on the planet, especially with the whole story of the witch hunts around the planet. It was as though that subject of woman's sexuality, woman's nature, and even a man's femininity, had become taboo. Which is why we see such extremes on the planet right now, towards different movements to try and break the shackles of those taboos. Well, that's in a way what I do with women. I break the shackles. I break the chains that are holding them. And Dima was relating to me that when he heard the workshop, and this was actually a couple of years ago, but that it was almost terrifying being on the other side of the door, hearing this enormous power coming out of these women, but not knowing what were they doing.
Yeah, I realized the glass was shaking.
Yeah.
For me, it was really intensive to stand behind the door, but I saw that the faces of women that came out, they were different. They were much more relaxed. They were more in contact with something. I don't know what exactly.
Yes. And so by giving women permission to really open up the throat, because that's where a lot of us have this blockage, and a lot of that comes from early sexual experiences, abuses, disappointments in bed, all of those kinds of things, conditionings from mothers, fathers, shaming. Women get shamed a lot about their bodies. When you start to take that off and say, actually, you can actually accept yourself. You can open up your throat and breathe deep in a big belly, and let the sound come through. It's as though I take off a lifetime of repression in through the workshop. Not me personally. She does it herself, but I'm the
Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean each woman?
Each woman does it herself, but it is because what my job is there is to reconnect her to her fundamental roots. When we're swimming around in the mind all the time, thinking, worrying, we're not deep in the body. We're not connected to the body. So a big part of my working with women is to get their breath not just down into the heart, not just down into the belly, but actually down into the womb, and actually down into the vagina, which I call the eoni, which is something that, has become so misunderstood. And even in spiritual circles, it's devalued. But if we are really honest, we'll recognize that sexual energy is what drives the entire planet, in some form or another. Marketing, media, relationship, we're all looking for that point of connection, which is what sexual energy is, So when you give a woman permission to really open up her sexual energy from within herself, not in relation to somebody else, but from within herself, then you open up the true nature. It really is like letting off an incredible power in her body. And with that comes a cleansing. All the old pain, the where she's held herself back, all the things that she thought she had to hide inside herself, it comes out. And when that cleansing goes through her, some new vibration starts to open up, like a sense of space inside, a sense of, oh, this is me. Because those traumas, they rule us from within. They loop around in our brain. They shape our body a certain way. They make us eat certain things, They make us relate emotionally a certain way. And once you start to clean those traumas that got stuck, and sound and breath, I found, is absolutely the most direct way to do it. That her own voice is her biggest tool for healing. But nobody taught her how to use it. And again, because I'm completely open, like my throat is completely open, there's nothing holding it, so there isn't a sound that I can't make, really. Having been first trained as a musician, as a jazz singer, and then being trained really in the art of using the voice in healing, I'm completely open. And And that's what reminds, because as women, we relate to each other's bodies more than anything. You know, we transmit to each other through our bodies. So when my body's open, it gives her permission. So it doesn't matter whether I'm in a room of 10 people or 300 or in a concert situation where I'm with, 1,000, 2,000, 6,000. My body is transmitting that sense of you can trust yourself, you can trust this love, you can trust this loving feminine energy, that's flowing through you. And that's why by the end of the workshop, when they came out, you saw that their eyes were more bright and there was something rested inside the body, this sense of, I'm so connected to my love and this is me. And, it's like a beauty that starts to shine from within.
Can I ask you, does it work for men the same way? I mean, have men ever came to the workshop?
Well, it's interesting, when I was touring a lot in Europe, one of the cities I found that was quite, let's say, spiritually experimental for the men was Amsterdam. And I ended up doing several festivals there. And the men asked me, they said, you're workshopping with the women and we see these amazing things happening. Like sometimes, for example, when I was in a big tent of women, I'd come out and there'd be men just like lined on the ground, just laying on the ground around the perimeter, just soaking the energy up. And they said, please, can you work with us? So I started to work with the men every year in Amsterdam. I even did a workshop, not in a festival environment, but in the city with about 100 men. And it's so beautiful to see. Men have a very different conditioning in their body than women. Like men naturally trust their voice more. It's like in your initiation as a man, from boy to man, you already cross through that thing of being, the sweet young boy to I'm becoming a man,
It's breaking.
And it's breaking. But everybody says, that's great, don't they? They say, that's amazing. Well, we don't get that passage. So women's got to stay nice. Actually, they speak more here. We've got to be nice and good girls. But a man is acknowledged that now you're becoming a man, son.
That's true.
And so when I work with the men, when I started to get the men to like sing from deep in the belly, when I'm working with the singing, this is the visual, is that the root for a man is like right down in the testicles, the perineum, and that's their anchor. So when they breathe from deep in the belly, from right down in the chest, that there's this life force available to them that comes up from the earth. And when they let that sing with those deep, like powerful voices, it's really a force to behold. It doesn't take long with a bunch of men to actually get them singing from that place. I remember one workshop I did with men, and one man went into a full Shakti opening. So what is that? Well, it meant that primal feminine life force, or we call it in India the Kundalini, or that shaking energy. It's like comes up through the body and it starts shaking, and you look like you're an epileptic or something like that, But there's so much fire and passion and love rising and shaking and clearing the channel. So I had one guy, and we went to full-on Shakti opening, and the guys in the room didn't know what to do. They went into full like mother mode. They wanted to hold him down and they wanted to touch him. I'm just like, leave him alone. He's absolutely where he needs to be. So I realized early on that you can open up this pure feminine channel in a man. And when a man has that open in him, his sensitivity to his femininity and to woman is tenfold. And that's often what's referred to as a tantric master, or mastery takes time to actually to use the discipline and the discernment and everything that comes from being a very, very open man. Because when a man is very open, he's very attractive, physically he doesn't have to be attractive, but there's something about his field, his nature, his eyes, his body that becomes very attractive. So I realized that, you know, in workshopping together with men, this energy, it was as though my feeling in those workshops was that, you know, the Mother Earth is just waiting. She's just calling men to just wake up and let her that deep feminine life force, that essence, that absolute respect and reverence and openness. She's calling. She's calling man, and I found that is my greatest challenge, I guess, as a workshop facilitator, is to reach the men, because it's as though they pretend to be deaf. I know they're not.
Can I ask you, turning back a little bit to that moment when I couldn't really stand behind the closed door, I was a little worried.
Yeah.
Do you feel that men can actually stand in front of a woman when she's truly opening up and in full power? Is it really possible for a man?
You mean when she's cleansing, like when she's releasing some trauma?
When she's in full power.
That is an absolute man's role in life. To be in when she's in full power. But then we have to define, what do you mean by full power? So I have my idea, but you tell me what your idea is.
The thing is that, in our society, most strong women say that they are left alone because there are not enough men who can actually stand up to their power, because they don't like to see a woman to be that strong or independent, or like being able to manage the life on her own, and she needs to be weak maybe at home in this way. And also there is another perspective when a woman is not really in power, but really emotional and a little bit chaotic, but in the sense that when man becomes scared of her, like he doesn't know what to expect from a woman. So this is another
aspect.
aspect. So I would love to hear from you what you see is a woman in power.
Yes.
Because you see many women and you work with so many women around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting question, because something that I want to open in women is actually not necessarily their power, but their love. You see, and that is where natural power comes from. So when she's connected to her love, she's connected to an incredible flow of life. It flows up through her body. Her body's built for pleasure, right? So the yoni, or the vagina, it's built for pleasure. Not even just to be pleasured by a man. And I'm not talking about masturbation or anything like that. But actually, when a woman's really in her body, this center becomes so sensitive that all she has to do is close, the pelvic floor, the yoni muscles, and focus her love there, and she'll get this ripple of ecstasy go up through her body. She's built for that, right? Not many women remember that. And again, that's part of my work, to remind her body of that, because she's been too ashamed. So when a woman's being loved by a man, and I mean really loved, like he just loves her, what you expressed to me was that she can become so emotionally chaotic, like unpredictable. That unpredictability is a natural force of woman. She's meant to be that way. It is the nature, or the first principle of the feminine, is that creativity comes out of the chaos. So we've tried to make women more logical, more controllable, more structured, more able to function in the world, but it's so against her nature. So when she starts to get loved, all of the control, the things she repressed, they start to come out of her. And you see it really like after you make love. Sometimes you think you make beautiful love with your woman, and the next minute she just throws something completely unexpected at you. Like, where did that come from? We just made love, for example, and the next day or two, and you're just thinking as a man, this is just so strange. I don't know how to deal with this. Because the energy of a loving penis, it's like a purifying wand, that just it starts to touch inside of the wall and the energy, not just the physical wall, but the traumas that got stuck there. The penis energy starts to purify it, and it starts to come out of her. And awfully sometimes. It's like you've opened up Pandora's box, and she's completely unpredictable, and she's throwing something at you that you didn't do, or that is really unreal, And that's why it's important for women to understand and become responsible, to recognize that when they come into the presence of love with a man, they're going to go through hell for a little while, because they're going to start cleaning out their past. And often what you're cleaning out in her, whether you've realized this or not, and I'm sure a lot of men have realized this, is her past men. It's like you get the shitty job as a man of having to clean out her past men, because we're the receiver, and we hold energy in the eoni, in the womb. Then again, through that direct conscious contact with her through the lovemaking, that past starts to come out at you, and you're thinking, I never disrespected her like this, or or maybe you are, maybe you're carrying out something that her past men did, and she's going, there it is again, you men, you are all the same, projection. Sometimes it's legitimate, so she is seeing a past replication of what's happened before, Again, something that I work so much with women is this emotional cleansing. What I want to see in a woman is that she's being responsible for her emotional world. So I developed a practice, for example, called emotional cleansing, and I created 5 soundtracks with voice, with music, groove, everything. And each soundtrack has an emotion. So, for example, there's an emotion of a soundtrack of anger, where I'm just completely letting go, but vocally, And it's a really grungy, like tribal fusion beat, And so the woman's given full permission to dance to this and to sound to it, to let that absolute anger and rage come through.
Can women actually just find these tracks through your site?
Yes, my site is just in about a week they'll be back up again.
Okay.
Yeah, and yes, they can find the practices.
And can they do it on their own?
Yes, that's exactly why I designed them, because I realized that a lot of women can't physically get to me, and they need to be held. And that's the presence of my voice, and there's also YouTube videos on it, that allows them to be supported. Because if you're just trying to do it on your own, it feels kind of like, oh, can I really do this? Can I really let go? Can I really let rip? And that's just one emotion. There's grief, there's fear. Each track has a different quality and a different practice that goes with it. So what I'm reminding women is that they can let this emotion go through their body, but consciously. You see, we've been told, oh, your emotions are not good, you're too chaotic, you're too much, So women try, and men as well, actually. It's not just women. We're all told that. You should repress it. You should keep control of it. You should behave. You should be a good boy, you should be a good girl, and you should keep control of it, because that's what a good human being does,
That's right.
And so with this particular practice, the emotional cleansing, it gives her... Actually, somebody asked me, can men do it? But there are practices on that. Like, for example, anger, definitely the men can do that. Grief, where you're letting go of that deep grief, definitely they can do that. Fear, absolutely. So men could do that. But it's just that whenever I lead a practice, I always talk the consciousness down into the body. Because if we are moving from the mind, in other words, we're trying to just express our anger from the mind, it doesn't work. It has to come from the very guts, from the very core, from the awareness being deep inside the body. And that way you're not doing it. The energy is just moving through you. And actually that can be quite scary at first for people, because if they really let go to it, they start to realize that inside of their emotions is an enormous power, like an incredible power. When somebody's grieving and they're really wailing and crying, there's an amazing power in that. When someone's ragingly angry, which is what you maybe heard some of that on the other side of the door.
I guess I did.
Yeah, they're an incredible power, But like any thing that we open up inside, we also need to bring it back to the balance point. So every practice always begins with a balance and ends with a balance practice. So, for example, working with the vibration of Om, because it just harmonizes the body. I remember meeting a woman in Bali, and she said, I did your emotional cleansing, and I did 5 emotions in one day. And I was like, oh my God, And I said, and did you do them? And she said, and I just feel so out of control, I said, and did you do the Om balance? Oh, no, I didn't do that at the end. I said, well, 5 emotions is a little bit too much to go through in a day.
Unleashed everything.
She's unleashed everything, and then she was in chaos for a couple of weeks.
And how long does one practice last? One emotion practice?
It depends, because the woman can loop it. So say she's really angry, she might loop that track 4 or 5 times and it'd be, sounding for 20 minutes, But there's the entry into the body meditation, which is like a 10-minute meditation. So all up, it's probably about a 30-minute, process if you really want to go in and it's particularly, you see that you've got a problem there. You see that emotion's really driving you through your life. Like people are telling you, you've got a serious anger issue you need to do. Or your husband...
That's a good sign to do something.
Yeah, exactly. Or your husband just says, I just can't talk to you anymore, I just can't talk to you, If a woman finds from her man that he just says, I just can't talk to you anymore, she knows she's got something she really needs to deal with.
But that's about responsibility, actually.
And that's about responsibility. So what this teaches you is you start to see, through allowing the full emotion to go through, this is the root of it. This is why it's here. And afterwards you feel very big space. So literally the vibration of the voice, it shifts the thick, heavy, dense past that gets locked in the body, which eventually becomes illness, So again, that's why I say their own voice is their biggest healing tool.
Is there anything that you do yourself every day, like a practice?
Absolutely. I mean, I am very conscious of when I get up in the morning, of not going into the outer world. I stay in my inner world until it's really deeply connected. Doesn't mean I don't talk to my husband or my daughter or whatever, but as soon as I've had enough water in my system and a cup of tea, I go in and I meditate. But again, with feminine meditation, it's a little bit different to the principle that many of us are taught today, which is still the mind. And, I think all meditation is breath-based, and mine certainly is too. But for feminine meditation, yes, I always release the throat with a certain breath, and I open the channel down, the energetic channel. You can't see it, but it's the life path of the body, the chakra path of the body. But for women, it really begins in the throat, because we're all about talking, communication, making things happen with our words. It's a very feminine quality. And of course, some men like you yourself, Dima, are one of those people, And so for me, it's about getting the channel open. So I do use a certain breath and a little bit of sound always in that. Because if I can open the channel, the heart, the belly, the womb, the eoni, with the vibration of my voice, all the fascia relaxes, and if I have a lot of emotion in there, like, it doesn't happen very often. I'm not a very emotional person anymore, maybe because I've done so much clearing myself. But if there is something that I've picked up in my field, from somebody, or within myself, then I use a certain sound practice. And it's a very raw sound, and probably I shouldn't do it because I'm going to blow your listeners' ears out, which I don't want to do. But it's a primal sound. It's sound and shakes the field clean, I also work with aum, but I work with a lot of overtones with it. That's one of the practices that I do daily. And the other one is that I have a practice that I wish you could see me, but my hands are down towards the earth, and it's a standing practice. And if we think of the field of the body, it looks quite a lot like a torus field. This like a like a flowing big ball that runs up through the center of the body. And it goes up through above the head, right up to the soul, and it spirals back out again. And so I have a practice that opens up from the earth. So my hands are down on the earth, not on the earth, but facing downwards. And I'm standing and I'm taking that life force up through the center of the channel and through the hands, and I'm lifting the hands by the sides right up towards the sky to connect with my soul, and until there's that absolute connection, with the sun, or everything you think of as this absolute lovingness, of him, and back down towards the earth. And it's a very slow movement. The absolute key to all practice, and certainly feminine practice, is that we must feel the absolute sensation in the body. So even if your listeners now put your first finger and your thumb together and you close your eyes and you relax your breath, you'll feel that little pulse there. You'll feel that little tingling sensation there. And this is your vibration. If you don't make that connection when you attempt to meditate or do any kind of practice, then you're not in your body. You must be in the sensation, that fine sensitivity. And the fingers is the first place to feel it. That vibration is going through your entire field, through your entire body. But the fingers is a really easy way when you put that first finger and thumb together to connect into the sensitivity.
It's true. I mean, it's like a mudra, an Indian mudra, but I always paid attention only to the shape of it. But when you put the fingers together, you actually feel this vibration.
That's right. That's what most people miss in the most simple mudra, is that if you don't make the connection of this is my vibration, this is my life pulse, then we don't enter the body. We just swim around a little bit in there. Swim around in the mind, and we go, why can't I stay focused? This is your tool to stay focused. Again, I have other practices that work with that, where the palms are together, like in that namaste or prayer gesture in front of the heart. And again, I'm having people to feel that point of connection. When we can feel that point of connection, this is where life is happening. What we lose in the daily life, because we're so focused in this outer world, is this point of connection. And that's intimacy, And without intimacy, life becomes so boring. And we're looking for more and more entertainment to try and fill the void of no connection. And we'll never find it. And that's why I don't, in the morning, enter the outer world until I've entered my inner world, my inner cosmos. So that's fundamental for me.
Thank you for sharing. In one of your Instagram posts, you shared that you started noticing the power of your voice when you were around 17. Did something special happen to you then? Was there any prerequisite, an event that brought you to this?
When I was 17, my mother said to me, you need to move out of my house. She didn't live in the house herself. She'd moved out 1 year before, but she said, listen, I've got some serious debts and I'm going to sell this house, so you need to go and rent with
That's
somebody.
Tough. I guess it's tough for 17.
Yeah, really. But I was very, how to say, I was always willing to try anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just knew what I had to do, and I never ever looked back, or even though there was fear, I'd face the fear. I've always had this sense of that's really scary, but I'm going to try it, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I moved into a house through the newspaper. I met this woman. And after I moved into her house, I was singing in her kitchen. And she said, wow, you've got an amazing voice. And she said, have you trained? I said, no, I've never trained. You know, I used to sing when I was a girl a lot because my grandfather was a musician. And he said, you know, you have the gift. I really want to get you trained. And my mother said no. All my childhood, my mother said no. Because she didn't want me to end up, you know, like how she'd suffered as being the daughter of musicians. Mm-hmm. You know, because they're always on the road. They've never got enough money, you know. So she was determined that any side of music was going to get squashed in me. So when I was 17, you know, I left her wing like totally and completely. And so this woman I was living with said, I'm going to send you to a teacher because you've got to train this voice. It's too good, you know. So I went to...
So she actually paid for you or just...
No, she just gave me the contact and she pushed me. That's what I needed. I needed somebody to believe and to recognize not just my grandfather, because you think, you think, oh, my grandfather, he's biased, you know. But she was unbiased, and she was a musician herself. And so when I had those first music lessons, singing lessons, I was just like a baby crying my eyes out every single lesson, as though my soul was crying to say, thank you. You're on the right path now. And actually, she gave me the most beautiful tool that I would give to any teenager. And that is, she said, if you could sing, because she saw the gift, right? And many teenagers, they have a gift, right? Mm-hmm. If you could sing, how would you use it? What would it look like? Where would you do it? Etc. She said, and I want you to write it down. Like, there's no limits on it. So just write down, if you could use this gift, how would you use it, right? And I wrote down and I said, if I could sing, I wouldn't sing just for entertainment. I would sing for healing. I would sing to really help people to heal from sicknesses and all kinds of, you know, emotional things. Because I'd been through a lot even by 17. At that stage in my life. So I'd suffered already a lot, you know, and I thought if I could have that gift, that's what I'd do with it, you know. So that was my first sign that, again, you know, that murashki or the goosebumps when I wrote that was just amazing, and I was just crying, you know, as I'm writing.
Just in case murashki is goosebumps.
Yeah, in Russian. And that was actually, that piece of writing held me on track, because I then eventually, it's a long story, but eventually I went into the conservatorium and I studied jazz. Mm-hmm. And it was against all odds, because my mother said I would never succeed and I didn't have the gift and I'll be home soon, kind of thing. And I didn't have the training for conservatorium. So I was up against kind of teenage kids who had been training since they were 5 years old in their instruments, you know. So it was only going to take a miracle to get me into that conservatorium. But my auntie, who was my mother's sister, she was just known as the black sheep, the crazy one, you know, the psycho of the family. It was her I went to after I left my mother's wing, just before my 18th birthday. She was on the other side of the country in Australia. And she actually laid my whole life path out in front of me. She was incredibly psychic, you know. She said, you're going to be a jazz singer. You're not going to be a musical theatre or actress or anything you think you're going to be. You're not going to be a psychologist. This is what you're going to do. You're going to study in the conservatorium. Then you're going to go to Sydney. And then you're going to America. And then you're going to go to the world stage. And of course that seemed outrageous at the time because I didn't have any training. I'd done 6 months of singing lessons at that stage. So when I did that degree, and then I went into the world of jazz and was the ambitious young jazz singer, like really aggressively ambitious and everything, I eventually hit the wall. And it didn't take me very long. I think I was 23, where I was an emotional wreck. Every time I performed, I felt like I wanted to commit suicide because if I didn't get the kind of recognition that I wanted to from my audience, I felt like I was hopeless and not talented and that I should just quit. And, I really put myself through a lot of negativity, criticism. I think every artist has huge self-criticism, and I certainly did. But when I was 23, I realized that something had to change, or I wasn't going to make it.
Quite early, 23.
I think, I think it was because I was an old soul. When I was 15, I started reading Lobsang Rampa Buddhist books, and when I was 18, I was already going to a lot of channelings and Reiki circles, and this was back when the New Age movement was really big in the late 80s and 90s, in Australia. And so I'd had quite a deep taste of my nature, quite young. And to go into the jazz world actually meant that I had to put it aside. I had to be a bit more straight, serious, and more social. And I really put my energy into being a singer of power, a sexy singer, all of those things that people wanted on the stage. And that's when I started to recognize I was losing myself.
So what happened in the end? Because now you're cleansing women, helping them reconnect with themselves. You're actually connecting voice with the womb. How did this transition happen?
Yeah.
How did you learn that your voice could also heal and started healing others?
Well, at that point, at 23, I went to the most important guide in my life was actually not human. It was the ocean.
Wow.
I'd grown up on the ocean. My father was a fisherman, and he had drowned in the ocean when I was 3. Yeah, so she was like the voice of life and death for me. My grandparents lived straight on the ocean. So it was where I went for solace, always, when I was losing myself. And even at that time, I went and moved to the ocean and tried to find myself there. And it was where I went through a very big opening, I guess. And I started to cry out to her and say, where have I gone so wrong? How have I lost myself, And it was through the voice of the elements that this recognition of true music came. And that is that there is true music in the wind. There's true music in the waves, slapping against the rocks, on that ocean wall. There's this music that is in nature that I had not encountered clearly, not at that point. And at that point, in my deepest sadness, I said, please show me where I've gone wrong. And I started to literally hear an answer in the wind. And I started to emulate it. Normally as singers, we emulate other singers, right? That's how we learn to sing. We learn from the greatest singers there are, and we try to copy what we hear and, pick up their style and etc. But now the elements started to become my direct source of teaching, And so I went back to this place by the sea or by the ocean. Australia has very powerful ocean and very powerful cliffs, like big mother mountains, And I went to this place every day after my first experience of just hearing and singing what I was hearing. And after about 2 weeks, it was as though I sang myself back into the earth. That was as though it was. Literally, my head went down on the earth, like, in that like you see the Muslim prayer or something like that. My head went down to the earth after I'd been singing for an hour. And it was as though my body went inside the earth. And then I understood that there was this incredible intelligence there. And she was so loving, just this loving intelligence, not with a human voice at all. But I realized she was the voice or the vibration or the resonance she was vibrating through everything we heard. Whether it was a freeway, whether it was a bird. There's no delineation because she doesn't delineate. When I realized just how much power and life and unconditionalness she birthed every second on this planet, I realized who it was that I was made from, that I was that vibration. You see, it wasn't like she was a goddess or anything like that. I was that vibration. And I said to her, because it felt very feminine in the presence, if there's any way I can sing for you, to remind other people that they are woven from the fabric of this earth and this universe, I said, then please show me how, And that was a really difficult request, because who could show me this, apart from her directly? But I needed somebody a bit more, body, to be able to direct me. And literally within, I think, about a week or so, a Native American medicine man, Shaman, came into my life. He was touring down in Australia from the desert in New Mexico was where he lived.
What was he touring with?
Huh?
What was he touring with?
He was there. He was 50 years old, and he had gone to the desert mountains at that age, and he'd gone and done something which is very traditional for a medicine person. He cried for a vision. So he went and he fasted on top of the mountains with no food, no water. And he was given this vision that he was to go on all the altars of the earth, which is another old way of saying all the different countries in the world. And he was to share this ancient knowledge, because he came from a very strong medicine family or shamanic family. In America, they don't call them shamans because they're from the north. Shamans are from South America.
Is it something similar to Castaneda, just to give
yes.
analogy? Okay.
In a way, yes. And she said to him this or spirit, he called it spirit, this masculine and feminine polarity, this intelligence. Go and teach all the children of the earth and remind them of their tribalness, remind them that they are part of this Mother Earth and that they're responsible for her, and that they should wake up their real gifts and live from that and bring more harmony back into the world. So that was his vision, and he was an extraordinary singer, actually, because he'd been singing since he was born in ceremony, and he had this unearthly deep voice, like almost like a black man, but so deep, and of course he was trained in many ceremonies, so he was bringing those ceremonies to people around the globe, and he was saying, doesn't matter what color your skin is, it doesn't matter what you believe, it's about finding your roots again and your direct connection to the earth, to the universe, to creation, to the mystery of life. Which, of course, at that point in my life was highly resonant for me. But particularly when I heard him sing, it was just like my soul just broke open, and I recognized that I somehow knew this man, and I knew what he was teaching. So it was a long journey, but of course I ended up becoming his student. And he said to me, if you become my student, you're going to have to leave everything. So I left my jazz career, my car, my home, my everything, and went to the desert in New Mexico.
For how many years?
11 years I was with him.
11 years you spent in the desert.
Not all that time in the desert, but that was our base, because of course after several years I ended up going out and touring a lot in Europe and America and Australia and New Zealand. But that was my home. That became my home. And I, of course, became his wife eventually and had his child. And so it was a big journey, you know. But I think the beautiful thing about the way that he taught, you know, he used to say to me, you know, I'm a man, you're a woman, so there's certain things I can't teach you. Mm-hmm. You have to go directly to the source to learn about your womanness.
Also give you some responsibility.
Absolutely, it did. You know, I remember when I was going up to my first Vision Quest ceremony. So I was facing fasting for 4 days with no food and water in a high desert country. I was about 8,000 feet up. It's hot, you know, and you sit around a fire for that
and
4 days.
Is it cold at night?
Yeah, it's cool. It's pretty cold at night. Not super cold, but cold.
So you had some extra clothes just in case?
I had a sleeping bag with me, and I had a fire. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to him, yeah, but what if the wind comes? I could burn the forest down. That's the thing I'm most afraid of, you know, here. And he said, well, then, Peru, you need to learn how to call the wind. You need to learn how to talk to the wind. I said, but you can do it. Because he clearly had that direct connection with the elements. He could stop the rain and do these different things. And he said, no, I'm not going to do it for you. You're going to figure it out. You know? And actually, that's exactly what happened on that particular Vision Quest. That I think I was in my second or third day, and this huge storm came in. And with it, this big wind came. And
storm was rain?
Not yet. It was wind first. You know how before a storm, and it started to rain a little bit, but mostly it was wind. And I was like there's no humidity up there, right? Mm-hmm. Up in those mountains. It's hot. And it's all pine and juniper forest. Mm-hmm. So if you catch a spark, you can just set the forest on fire like that, you know? So at that point, I realized that I only had one choice. I had to start communicating with that wind. Mm-hmm. And I did it with all of myself. And what came through was this incredibly beautiful song. It's actually on one of my CDs. And
What's it called?
It's called Maya Chichi. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand the words that I was singing, but that was quite common for me at that stage, that languages were coming through that I didn't understand. Mm-hmm. But I didn't understand, but the feeling I absolutely understood. And this song, this chant was just coming through me and cycling. And it was with such a love. Like I was just crying at the beauty that I was singing to this wind. And it was like the wind was my lover. Mm-hmm. And when I found out the meaning of the chant later, because he had a great command on ancient languages, and this was an ancient language, and he said, you're saying Maya Chichi, he's saying, here are my breasts, you know. Here is the nectar of my yoni. Here is my everything. I give it to you, you know. And the wind just went, it just stopped. Just stopped, completely stopped. And that was when I realized, wow, the elements, they listen to us. Mm-hmm. But mostly we don't communicate with them, you know. So that was my first really like on the edge of life kind of connection. I'd had it first in the ocean, but I was just singing it. I was emulating it at that stage. There was no life or death. This was like so that was my first taste of wow, you know, the elements, they are so alive, and there is this symbiotic relationship between human beings.
You know, you're saying that you were afraid of the fire catching up. But I'm just imagining myself there, and I would be afraid of snakes or just something. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I wouldn't be so afraid of the fire, but the snakes and I mean any other dangers, but still, it's amazing.
Actually, one experience that happened on that same quest was I was hearing this sound, and it was the middle of the night. Can you imagine trying to stay awake for 4 days?
No, I cannot.
You completely go a bit mad, you know, because you start to cross over into other realms because you're dreaming awake. Like your body's sitting up, but your eyes start to close, you know, and you start to enter into these other realms. But they built this thing into this quest ceremony where there was a rule. Mm-hmm. And the rule was if your fire goes out, your quest is over. Whoa. So you're going to come straight down if your fire's out, So your fire became your best friend. So you would say to you, if I fall asleep, fire, wake me up. And it would do that, And this one night I'm hearing this. Women making love or babies crying. I couldn't see.
Hyenas, maybe.
I couldn't understand what this sound was. It wasn't hyenas because I'd heard them before, because there were a lot up in these mountains. And I was like, what is that, But it stopped, and then I started to fall into the in-between, almost into a sleep. And the next minute, my teacher, my husband, was up on the mountain with a gun. He says to me, Peru, you've almost fallen asleep. Look at your fire. It's just embers,
So he was watching you?
No.
Not really?
He wasn't, because he was far down a mountain. But there was a campsite there where there was somebody always watching the fire. And our communication was through a drum. So I had a drum there. So if I got into trouble, I could always boom, boom, boom on the drum. Or if they wanted to tell us something, boom, boom, boom on the drum. But this night he suddenly appeared with a gun. And that freaked me out. It was like, when he said, get your fire going. He said, there's a mountain lion on the mountain.
Whoa.
2 of them.
Whoa.
So I'm there, he walks away, leaves me alone. And I'm there blowing on my fire to try and get it back up bright again. And then I look to my left, and there are these 2 bright red eyes looking at me. And I was terrified. It was the mountain lion.
But would the fire scare him off?
Theoretically, but he didn't come in close enough, because in this particular ceremony, you make a circle of 7 paces, and you set a protection around that circle, and you use cornmeal as to define your circle. You have cornmeal, right? And you say, this is my universe. Nothing crosses this unless it's safe, kind of thing. So this big mountain lion came right to the edge of that circle between my trees, and it was looking at me. And of course, there's a part of me that wishes I was able to just sit there and be still, and communicate. But my humanness, it just reached for my drum, boom, 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 to scare it away, So those are the sort of things that could happen in this kind of...
It sounds so unbelievable. And at the same time, I know you from Kiev. I saw you in Kiev in person and working with people. And I know that you're singing at this biggest venue here in Moscow, Krakow City Hall. And at the same time, you have such a mystical aspect to your life where you're with the spirits, with Mother Earth and lions around you.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, I think that was the grounding. For me, that was the grounding, to be able to take that direct connection and be able to realize that anything that I experienced is from within my body. So any tool that I used at that time, eventually it fell away. Because I realized that any tool that I ever used, whatever ceremony, medicine pipe, whatever tool we used for healing, eventually all the tools fell away. Because I realized that I was the body of life, and that my womb space was connected to the cosmic womb. Now that sounds really unreal. It sounds almost ridiculous, but I realized it. So when I step into a space, a workshop space, a concert hall, I honestly feel like I'm stepping into the cosmos, and that my body is an open, like a big open womb, basically. So I'm transmitting that vibration through the body. And that's wonderful when it's amplified, as you can imagine, on mic, and that it can then go straight into the body of other people. So many people say that they experience tears, they experience healings, they get pregnant, all these different things happen. They meet their love, and through the transmission of that direct vibration.
I know one thing, that some women after your workshop, they even get the unexpected menstrual cycle going on, which is like a physical proof of something going on. Yeah,
definitely. And especially if they, have been a bit disconnected from themselves. It is their body's way of showing them you've reconnected. You're here. You've arrived in your body, and welcome it,
Just and a little unrelated question. You sing, but do you sometimes sing all those songs that you were practicing, or some pop music that you hear, or you're mostly into what you feel, into the sound of what you feel?
Well, I mean, I now create, I suppose for the last 15, 20 years at least now, I create in whatever style I feel the song is going to be most potent in. So sometimes I create in pop soul style, like R&B. Sometimes I compose in ethnic, world music style, tribal style. Sometimes I compose in Indian classical style or Middle Eastern style or jazz, So, yes, I sing what I feel, but again, because of that musicianship and the merging of the two worlds of the, let's say, the healing world of sound and the musician, the inner musician is strong, then I can choose which direction I shape a song in. So I've created basically a whole genre of music, which is essentially feminine music. It's music that makes women and men, when they hear it, it makes them feel very sensual. It makes them feel a connection to their body or to the earth or whatever they need, But, I have a 19-year-old daughter, and Beyonce is playing in the house sometimes, or whoever, if it's the latest thing. And we're grooving along to it for sure, So I kind of know what's contemporary, and sometimes we'll sing that together, or we're just messing around, and So yes, I do just mess around on commercial music sometimes, It's fun.
I want to ask you about your vision of male-female energy coming together. One of the things I would like to share, when you arrived to Kiev 6 years ago, your luggage wouldn't arrive with you. It was lost somewhere.
That's right.
And you wouldn't have your clothes. And on the first day we were going for an interview for
That's
some
right.
Ukrainian
TV. Yeah.
And I remember that you had only one toothbrush with your husband. And the fun thing is that even though before, ever in my life, I would actually see a situation like this personally, I would think I would be squeamish about it. But when I looked at it, that you shared the toothbrush, it was so intimate, and I felt, wow, that's what everyone has to do. I mean, we kiss and we do more things.
That's right.
We exchange saliva and everything.
Yeah.
But why would I even feel squeamish with someone that I love? I mean, definitely, we're not talking about the situation when we have two
toothbrushes, exactly.
But I remember that we went to my wife's workshop, and she forgot her toothbrush, and I remember this situation. I thought, I want to offer her. I want to see that she feel as intimate with me.
And what was the case?
Yeah, of course she used it. I mean, and for me it was like the ultimate check of intimacy.
That's so true.
Really.
That's so true. And I didn't even notice that. That's so funny that you noticed that, because I couldn't even check that in my memory as having happened,
And even right now, you're together for quite some time with your husband, but still you kiss, and it's kind of a really sexy kiss. It's not like an occasional kiss, like a bypasser's kiss, let's call it this way.
No, I think, that these bypasser kiss, like, what he means by bypasser, like a peck on the cheek or a peck on the lips,
Like, I don't know, something without feeling.
Yeah.
But Evan turned away because I felt something is going on here. Something is happening. And this is beautiful.
Yeah. I think, the kiss is the most precious thing in the relationship, to remind us to just stop, and be really like juicy together, like present together, like just drop into the body and let the body's kiss, the soul kiss. I very much do practice that with my husband, because when we're both busy and stuff, and when we part, who knows, it could be the last time you see each other. maybe I have this awareness because my father died, when I was 3, and he left my mum with 4 kids, and he drowned. So they never found the body. They never found the boat. They found nothing, and his crew all down. And you never know when the last time you see somebody. So you better make sure that you give them your love, I practice that with everybody I meet. So I'm known for hugging people, and it's not a squeeze on the chest, like a chest bump together. No, I hug people with my whole body because I don't know if I'll ever see that person again. But what can meet in that moment, that point of connection, is something real. And that's where the gold is in having a human body, is that point of connection. So I endeavor to live that in my daily life, is that I value every person that I meet. I mean, really meet. Sure, you're not going to meet necessarily the security guard that just let you through the gate, but anybody that I meet personally, for me, that's a great value, and I want that point of connection with them. So same with my husband. It's just I value any moment that I get to stop time and to really meet him.
That's a great way to call it, stopping time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something like familiarity. I guess I learned a while ago. Familiarity is like a disease. When we get familiar with our partner or our kids or whatever, that's when the magic stops. When we think we know everything, or we think they're going to be there the next time, that's when it stops. So anything that we can bring into our daily life as a practice to keep that presence there, to keep that I really value you, that sense of I really value you, that's so important.
Thank you for sharing.
Wow, that was a beautiful thing you felt uncomfortable about. My daughter always says the same thing. She goes, guys, come on, you have a child in the room here.
Just one last final message from you to the listeners about men treating women and women treating themselves and treating men. Can you send some message and some word to the world?
I think it's so important that we look deeper than the personality of the person that we're with. Because the personality is always changing. What we're looking for in the person is the love, like the deeper nature of the person. And we have to be so compassionate to recognize that in this day and age where there's not much direct earth connection, that we keep losing our nature, ourselves, inside ourselves. So I feel that our job for ourselves and our job for our partner is to remind them of who they are. So when they're completely lost themselves, like they're chaotic, emotions, you can tenderly remind them of who they are. Yeah, you can be going through this, but I know who you really are. That's a really important thing to remind each other of the real nature and to stay positive about that, because what tends to happen in relationships is we focus on the negative when we're not being ourselves, right? And we make that more dominant than acknowledging the moment when we are being ourselves or encouraging us to be ourselves, That's an important key in relationship. Always encourage your partner to be who they really are, and be wise enough to see when they're not being that and not to take that personally. Sometimes we'll remind them, but don't be an asshole, and tell them every time, because then you're going to be right and they're going to be wrong, That's the worst. But find a tender way. Whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, find a tender way. Like a way to romance them back into themselves. That's what's really important, to romance them into what they really are, what they really value. That's real romance. That's living romance. It's not, Valentine's Day, 14th Feb bringing a bunch of flowers, though I always encourage men to bring a bunch of flowers to his woman because it's the best thing he can do for her. But, by the way, but that's where real romance is. Romancing, in a way, the soul. Whatever you can do to bring your person's real nature, your partner's real nature to the surface, that's real romance.
Thank you very much for this amazing interview.
Thank you so much, Dima. It's so wonderful to meet you again after these years. And this man has just grown exponentially, I have to say, since last time I saw him, though he was incredibly beautiful then.
Wasn't it just amazing how much wisdom Peruquois shared with us in this episode? Just in the description of this episode, I left a couple of links for you, leading to her Instagram page, to her Facebook page, also to her site, to her website, and I also left for you the top 5 songs for you to find and to listen on YouTube or on her site, because her voice is amazing. I can tell you that when she sings, it creates a really special atmosphere that you cannot really compare to anything else you've experienced before. Also, women, if you are interested in participating in Peruquois workshops, which I strongly advise you, please find all the information on her website. You will find the links, you will find the dates. Remember to rate us on iTunes, leave your feedback. I'm reading it, honestly, I'm curious whether you like it or not. Also, you can find us in Instagram just like that, hashtag Happiness Patterns Podcast or just Happiness Patterns. It's the nickname, and you will hear from me soon. Have a good one, boys and girls. Bye bye.